Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Happy April. I don't know what is going on, but I feel like now the year is starting to zoom by, and I don't know about you, but I am definitely not ready. There's so many things I need to do for later in the year, but since we already finished up another month, that means, you guessed it, we need to go and do our March reading wrap-up. Now, for the month of March, I was actually a co-host in the Realmathon. It is a readathon that Covers with Cassidy made and kindly asked me to go and help co-host Team Clerics with Tori, and I had a blast. I was so excited to be a part of this readathon. I did a lot of new things that I've never done before, such as my first reading sprints that I got to go and host, and that was so amazing. Everyone was so kind, and I definitely want to go and do some more reading sprints in the future. The month of March had a little bit of a hiccup because I ended up going and catching a cold, and then I had a week where I wasn't sick, and then I caught another cold. So that definitely went and put a little bit of a roadblock in my plans, and then we had 1 week that we were entirely busy. So I still got to do a lot of reading, but just not with the start that I was hoping to have. However, I did have 2 5-star reads for the month of March. So if you're curious in hearing that, I definitely go and stick around because these were some of my favorite books that I've read this year so far. Now, with my reading wrap-ups, I always love going and using Storygraph to go and look at some of my stats for that month. It is not sponsored or anything like that. I just really love looking at the statistics for my reading month, and I'm not a numbers girly. I'm a book girly. I hate numbers. I failed college algebra once and had to retake it again with a tutor, so I'm not a math girl by any means. I just love statistics when they come to the books I read. So I read 8 books total, and that was 3,003 pages, which is just so satisfying to go and see. It would have been even better if all the numbers were 3 for that, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. It's still a nice number. And then surprisingly, a lot of the books that I read were actually romance books. Now, I'm not really a romance reader, or at least I try to tell myself that, but I do find that if the books have like romance and fantasy, or maybe romance and horror, then I like them a lot more than if they're just strictly romance books. I read a mixture of all sorts of different types of books. I did print, digital, but majority of the books that I read were actually audiobooks, and that was just because I got sick and it was so hard for me to go and read a book physically, so I started switching over to reading some of my books through audiobook instead. Hi, Nuggy. And then my average star rating was 3.81, which I think has been the highest it's been this year so far. So with that being said, let's go and actually start talking about the books. Now, I did make a change, I think a couple months ago, where instead of going and saying the books in highest to lowest or lowest to highest rating, I will go and hold up the book and give you maybe a little bit of a description if I really did like the book, but mostly it will be a yes, no, or maybe style, because I do really enjoy that, and then I have a little bit of a synopsis that you'll get to see on the side, especially if I'm struggling to remember what the book is about. Starting off with the first book we're going to go over, which was actually coincidentally the last book that I read for the month of March, and that was this Wretched Alchemy by Tina Mars. This one I'm going to say maybe. I was so lucky to go and get an e-arc for this book. It was one that I've been so excited for because Tina Mars has been someone that I've been following on Threads ever since I created mine, and just following her writing journey and all those things, especially as someone that is part Asian and could relate to a lot of the things that she was going and saying on her own, I don't know if Threads calls it channel, profile, I'm not quite sure, but a lot of the things that she went and posted on there I could completely relate to. So as soon as I saw that she was opening up ARC applications, I jumped and ran to it. Now with this book, I believe it was a mixture of like a gladiator trial type of book and enemies to lovers, and I didn't necessarily see a lot of the gladiator pieces. There was this cool alchemy magic that I really enjoyed, and our main character seems to be a little bit different from other characters because she has a red streak in her hair, and I believe that means she's like shadow touched or demon touched or something. So she's special in a way, but a lot of people don't like this and look at her differently because of it. She also has this alchemy magic, and it seems to be something that only certain people have, and hers is decent, but at the beginning of the book it kind of seems like she's struggling with it, but then as soon as she gets in this trial, suddenly she's proficient at it. So there was that piece that kind of made it difficult for me to wrap my head around fully. And then there were some other parts that also I wasn't exactly in love with. And speaking of love, that had to do with the whole enemies to lovers piece. I did love the love interest, but because I read a different book this month that was a true enemies to lovers book, and I mean pure hatred towards each other, where they're trying to off each other and they have to begrudgingly work together. That is why when I read this Wretched Alchemy, the whole enemies to lovers premise didn't really work for me fully. Our female main character seemed to not like the male main character, but it was the type of thing where like she was trying to convince herself that she hated him, but at the same time was like, oh, but he's really hot. And then the male main character, he seemed a little bit on the grumpy side, but honestly, to me, what happened with their dynamic, it felt like he fell first. And that's kind of the vibes that I got the whole time. I didn't really get the enemies to lovers vibe from him. So because of that, and then a few other pieces, that's why I'm gonna say maybe on this. I did honestly rate it a 4-star, and I do really want to continue the book. This is the author's debut novel, and I really do want to go and support her because I did love a lot of the pieces with her story. I believe she also did potentially have trigger warnings, if I'm not mistaken. And then she did have a little bit of information in the back of the book that talked about the houses, the magic, and the different types of gods and goddesses in the story. Since I read it on my Kindle, it was really hard for me to go and flip back and forth to try to look up and review some of these pieces. So I will be really happy when I get a physical book because that will make it a lot easier for my brain to be able to go and reflect and know like the different connections going on in the story. So this was really promising, but I wouldn't say I was absolutely in love with it as much as I had hoped to be. Then we have Withered Hill by David Barnett. I listened to this one as an audiobook, and this one I would honestly say no. I was instantly drawn in because of the cover. I thought the silhouette of the rabbit was really eerie and captivating, and there were some pieces of the story that brought me in because it said that it was a folklore, and that is kind of a subgenre. I think it's called a subgenre that I haven't really read a lot of, so I was really interested to go and check it out. This was a book that I had on my Everend, and if you watched one of my previous vlogs, I am trying to go and finish reading all the books that I've unlocked on Everend because I'd like to cancel my account, and unfortunately when you cancel, you can't access your books. So I'm trying to go and finish through all of these, and this was one of the books that I had on this list. Now, this book was kind of a mixture of The Village, if you've seen that movie. I think it's by M. Night Shyamalan, and Midsummer. So it was a combination of those two, but honestly, I felt like I saw more aspects from The Village in this book. And with our main character, I believe like she is kind of trapped in this village and is trying to go and escape, but she isn't able to do so. And when she talks to other people about this, they will say like, as long as you behave, you will get to a point where you're able to go and leave, and it will all make sense when that happens. So we have this piece, but then there's also these flashbacks where we're seeing stuff from her life previously or past memories, past relationships. And honestly, I felt like I was getting a little bit lost in the story with all these different pieces. I can't tell you how many times I rewound my audiobook because I felt like I just kept missing pieces and I didn't understand how we got from this point to this point. So this is why I said this one is a no. It just didn't work for me. It had a great premise and really seemed intriguing, but it just wasn't for me. I wasn't really rooting for any characters, and between that getting lost in the story, yeah, not for me. Then we have Scythe and Sparrow by Brynne Weaver. This is book 3 in the Ruinous Love Triangle series, and I listened to this one as an audiobook. I have listened to Butcher and Blackbird. I think I listened to it a long time ago, possibly last year, maybe the year before, and I loved it. I thought the audiobook was so fun, and honestly, if I didn't consume this series in audiobook format, I probably wouldn't like it. It would be an unhaul for me because I'm not really a dark romance girl, but you give me a really amazing audiobook that is dual narrated and I'm hooked. Scythe and Sparrow, unfortunately, I would probably say that this one was a huge no for me. Like I said, this was book 3. It just didn't work for me. I did not like either character. So with this one, we're dealing with the third brother and kind of getting a little bit more of his story. We've seen pieces of him in the other books, basically knowing that he's he's heartbroken, he's kind of distant, he's not living in the same state as his other brothers, and he is a doctor, and he basically comes across this girl that is incredibly injured, and she goes and asks for his help. Well, the thing is, she works at a circus, and she is a tarot card reader, and when she does these card readings, she'll go and help these women that she can tell are in an abusive relationship. But she will go and off these people and take it upon herself to help go and free these women from these toxic relationships. And I thought that was going to be so cool, such a different concept. However, she was a horrible serial killer. I don't know how she managed to survive as long as she did, but everything she did was super basic, super beginner level. She was doing these huge things where it's like, how did you not get caught? How did they not kill you off? So there's this whole thing going on with this, and this poor guy, the male love interest, is trying to go and help correct a lot of these issues that she's dealing with and trying to get her unstuck from these situations. But then they get this whole friends with benefits type of situation where it's like they can't kiss, they can't do this, they can't do this, but they can do all these other pieces. I don't know, I did not like this one. This was my least favorite out of all the books, which I guess kind of works perfectly since it was book 3. But like I said, I think all of these books should be consumed in audiobook format, because regardless of how I feel about the 3rd book, I feel like the narrators did an amazing job. And I know that Brynne Weaver has another series called like Tourist Season or whatnot, and I really want to check those ones out. So you'll probably see those at some point on one of my wrap-ups. Then the next book I have here is The Spite House by Johnny Compton. This is one that I read with the other host from the Dungeons and Book Dragons readathon. We have a quarterly book club called the Book Dragons Book Club, and we actually did our very first live show going and talking about our thoughts and feelings about this book, answering some questions that Ivy had. And with this one, I'd probably say maybe. Now, with this book, it was really intriguing because we open up the story with this dad that is going and running away with his 2 daughters. And we don't really learn what exactly happened. He's kind of alluding that he's not necessarily wanted by the law. He hasn't done something criminal, but there are people looking for him. And because of this, they have kind of been on the run, living in these hotels and just trying to not make a huge appearance so people notice them and keep an eye on them. And he finds this job, I think in the newspaper, maybe it was online, where it's this really rich person that is wanting someone to go and live in this house and keep track of some paranormal pieces, and if they do so, they will get paid at the end of this experience. So he's like, this is a little bit weird, but I don't really have a lot of options, so sign me up. Now with this book, we get so many different POVs. I want to say maybe close to 10, maybe a minimum of 8. There were a lot of different point of views, and I feel like some of them were great and they really added on to the story. And then there were a few of them where I'm like, why was this necessary? So it was a really intriguing book. There were some really interesting pieces. However, one thing that I wasn't a fan of is that there were open-ended questions that didn't really get resolved at the end of the book that kind of made it difficult. Like, why did you bring this up if we're never going to find out more details about this? So that is why I'd say this one is a maybe, because if you're not really a fan of books that end that way, then this might not be a book for you, as well as the fact that it had so many different POVs. It was good, but I feel like some of these pieces might be a make or break with other people if they were intrigued about this book. Then we have Leather and Lark, which is the 2nd book in the Ruinous Love Triangle. It's the Ruinous Love Trilogy, not triangle. Why am I trying to say triangle? There's no triangle. But this was the 2nd one, like I said, by Brynne Weaver, and I loved this one. This one I rated 4.25 stars. I was a little bit hesitant because I know a lot of people absolutely loved the first one and weren't really fans of the 2nd one at all, so I was a little bit nervous. But I think one of the pieces that really worked for me with this one is that I absolutely love Grumpy Meets Sunshine storylines, so that was perfect for me and enjoying this book. I also kind of saw it as more of like a dark romance version of Heartless, which is a series by Elsie Silver, and it's cowboy romance. I know it's 2 opposite ends, but just some of the pieces with the Grumpy Meets Sunshine where like both of the female main characters in each book like play guitar and they can sing. I don't know, just with those two things, they were really similar for me. Kind of like the attraction pieces that they had to each other, and there was a little bit of hatred and not really liking each other, but being drawn. I don't know, I felt like those two books were perfect to go together. So if you liked that one and you've been wanting to read like a cowboy romance version of that, but without killing, then I'd say Heartless. But anyway, we're talking about Leather and Lark. I really liked this one. So Lark is kind of a part of this, I'd almost say like mafia family in a way, and they deal with cupcakes. And it will make sense when you read the book, but they have this whole business, and it seems like throughout their business, they kind of use it as a facade to go and get rid of people, especially if they're going and affecting things. And one of the problems that is happening is people that are associated with Lark and her family are disappearing. And that is where the male love interest comes into place, because her family kind of has their eyes on him and is potentially wanting to get rid of him. And Lark has a few issues because she had a horrible experience with him. However, he is the brother-in-law of her best friend. And so with a lot of these pieces, she's like, the only thing I can do is basically get a fake marriage arranged with him. And so she brings that up, and that basically happens, and they don't like each other at all, but they have to make this work and make this believable so that her family leaves him alone. Also, while this is going on, the male love interest learns a few extra additional pieces of Lark that she keeps hidden from other people, and she's also an amazingly talented singer. There was a concert scene that was pretty wowing. I liked it for multiple reasons, especially because the singing in the book was so good. Like, I wish I could have that on a playlist so I could listen to it specifically for the singing. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I don't think it surpassed Butcher and Blackbird in my eyes, because that was the start of the series and just really outside of my comfort zone and making me realize like, oh hey, I might actually like these types of books. So yeah, this one, I don't know if I said yes, but I would say yes. I would recommend this one, but please listen to it on audiobook specifically for the singing. It was so good. Then I'm going to actually skip the 2 5-star books that I want to talk about and talk about a different book because I don't want to end this video on a low. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Bochica by Carolina Flórez-Cerchiaro. I can't remember how, I listened to this before, but I can't remember it at the moment. But this one, I'd probably say a no as well. I believe this one was on my anticipated book releases a couple years ago, and I was really excited to pick it up. I decided to pick it up as an audiobook, and I absolutely love the eerie gothic feeling of the cover. But if I'm completely honest with you, I cannot remember anything about this book, which is why the little synopsis I leave on the side is going to be super handy and super convenient. All I can remember is there was a house that this main character grew up in, and I want to say something happened to her mother and they left this house, but then she has to come back to it again, and there's these ghosts, but also this person that she trusted and can't be trusted anymore. It's very vague, it's very fuzzy in my brain. And I think too, from what I remember, there were some flashbacks in this book as well, but a lot of it just didn't make sense and didn't line up fully. I was also incredibly sick when I was listening to this book, which probably didn't help my situation at all, but sadly this one is a no for me. I maybe down the road might go and try to read it again, maybe physically, and see if my experience is a little bit different, but for now this one is a no on my end, and I'm super bummed because I was very excited to go and check out this book. So next book we're going to talk about is Grey After Dark by Noelle W. Ihli, and this one was one of my 5-star reads for the month of March. This was such a good book, and I was honestly a little bit nervous. I actually got this book gifted for one of my birthdays from my good friend Kat from Curious Cat, and I really wanted to read this but was a little bit nervous because as I was reading through this, I realized that this book is actually inspired by true events. In this book, we have our main character who is a part of the Olympics, but she had a tragic accident that happened, and because of this is dealing with some phantom pains and sadly, because of that, is unable to really perform well in the Olympics. She decides to get away for the summer and kind of work at this like summer resort place. And while doing that, training, running, doing all these things to try to eliminate and forget a lot of the pain that is associated with her body. While she's doing this, she has some people there that are kind of warning her to be careful because there are bears. And unfortunately, a few years ago, one of the other volunteers there disappeared and they were never able to find her except for some clothes that had some blood on them. So they believe that she was attacked by bears. So people are kind of warning her about this, but she's like, no, there's nothing to go and worry about. Well, one thing leads to another, and she meets some strangers in the woods, and they do not seem like the best people. And sure enough, she gets abducted. And I'm gonna leave that piece there, but this book is inspired by true events. When I went and read that piece, it kind of added this extra bit of chills and everything because I was not aware of the person this book was based off of. So just knowing that aspect, a lot of the times when I was reading this book, I felt full out chills. I had goosebumps, and even talking about it right now, I feel those same chills on my body. It was a very intense book because you didn't really know what would go and happen, at least for me. I didn't know, would she survive? What would happen? How would she get out of this? What was she going to do? There are a lot of really interesting pieces, and then we also got a different aspect from another character who was a friend of hers for the Olympics and was one of her partners. He was aware of her accident and a lot of the trauma she faced. So we got to also see glimpses of what he was experiencing and what he was doing when he noticed things were not going well and something was off. I really loved how the author at the end of this book ended up going and talking about the person that this happened to. This was actually a story that happened when she was growing up, and she had this piece that she really wanted to go and dedicate this book to survivors, and I just thought it was so well done. This was my first book by this author, but I know a lot of people that have read other books by this author and have absolutely loved them. So I feel like just from this experience, this author might be an auto buy for me or an auto read, because I definitely do have a few other books by them that I really want to start reading. But yeah, I love this book. I thought it was so well done, and there were just some really great pieces to it. Now, there were some triggers as well that I should mention, but one thing I did appreciate was that even though there were these triggers, there was a closed door aspect on certain events so that it didn't really go into detail. Like, you knew what was happening, but you didn't have to get a lot of the gritty details. And as someone that had some triggers like SA and things like that, that was really appreciated on my end. And I'm glad that that wasn't really necessarily the focus, and more so the survival and some of the things that had to be done for survival. So yeah, highly recommend this book. Thought it was absolutely amazing, and like I said, 5-star read. This was 100% yes. So then the last book that I have here is Daggermouth by H.M. Wolfe. This was one that I'm sure you've seen everywhere. I've even done a video going and talking about this book on my Love It or Lose It video that I will link up here, but I was first brought to attention about this book on Threads because this author faced so much unfair backlash, and one of my favorite things about the book community is when they're seeing an indie author especially that is treated cruelly and unfairly, they will go and back her up. They will show her this unwavering support, which is so cool, and one of the things that I love about this community so much. And I was lucky enough to go and get a copy of this book. Now, I know some people are saying that they're struggling finding it because this book did get picked up traditionally, and I believe it's either going to get released around the summertime or towards the end of summer, because it had originally the release date of, I believe, the fall, and then it got moved up. But a lot of people are finding copies of this book from their local indie bookstores or even BAM. So I would still hold out hope that you might be able to go and find it at one of these places. But this book was so good. It was incredibly dark, and originally that was something that made me a little bit worried because dark romance books do have some of my triggers in them. But I wasn't really struggling with this book as much, and that might have been attributed to my mental state at the moment when I read this book. This was dystopian and was definitely a true enemies to lovers book. I did mention earlier that I read another enemies to lovers book, and honestly, this one was the one that just really stuck with me because I feel like if you're going to write an enemies to lovers book, you need to write it like this, with two characters that absolutely hate each other, want to off each other, but because they have a common goal in mind, they put aside those grudges and they try to go and work together, but still have that hatred towards each other. This was just so well done. I really loved those aspects. There were also some different point of views, and they really added to the story because we kind of have these other love interests, but also these other characters that do work inside the heart, and we get to see what things that they're dealing with, and everyone kind of has a purpose and a goal in mind, especially when Shadira, who is a Daggermouth, gets taken by the Vera in the heart, and she has to go and work and do a lot of the things that they're forcing on her so that she doesn't get any of her loved ones on the outside of the heart hurt. And then there's Grayson, who is an heir of the president, and he has a lot of roles that he has to play. He basically goes and executes anyone that goes and disobeys the president's laws, and he is dealing with some things of his own, and Shadira basically has a contract to go and kill Grayson, and she has a lot of revenge and a lot of grudges that she is holding against not only Grayson but against his father for putting not only her people but herself through a lot of the pain and the hurt that she's dealt with. There are so many entwining pieces in this book, and honestly the cliffhanger was just gut-wrenching. I had my jaw on the floor and I was like, wait, what? This is happening? And then there was another piece that got added, and I desperately need the next book, but unfortunately we won't be getting the next book until 2027, so I might have to do a reread of this book maybe at the end of the year, maybe sometime next year, so that I can just relive and remember a lot of pieces that happened, especially with that cliffhanger, just to see if there's any clues or anything else that I can go and catch, because holy crap, the end of the book moved so fast and it was so hard to put this book down. So I originally rated this one, I think 4.5 stars, but I was bouncing between that and 5 stars, and in the end I decided to change it to 5 stars. And if you can't tell already, this is a yes if I haven't already said that. It was so good. I had 2 different 5-star books. I really like that the colors kind of go together for each of these. They were both dark in different aspects, this one being more of a dark dystopian romance, and then this one kind of being a dark survival abduction type of book. Both of them were amazing and I absolutely love these. I believe now I'm at 3 5-star books for the year, and that's just wild considering we're 4 months into the year so far. But yeah, if you've read any of these books and you also enjoyed them, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Or if you have any books that you think I'd like to read, especially after knowing some of the 5-star reads that I had, then please let me know about those as well in the comments below. Who knows, maybe there's a chance that they're on my bookshelves and they might be one that I gravitate towards reading next, because I feel the itch to read books that kind of give me similar vibes as those. I'm really in the mood for, I guess, more dark romance, which who would have thought that would be me? I would never have thought I would be saying that in 2026, but here we are. But yeah, even though I read 8 books and didn't necessarily read as many books as I had hoped to finish for Realmathon, I'm still super happy with the books that I read, especially the fact that I had 2 5-star reads. I think that makes the month of March an absolutely amazing reading month, and I'm excited to see what books we read in the next few months. If you got to this point of the video and you'd like to show support but you don't know what to comment, maybe go and leave some trees in the comments because of Gray After Dark. And if you'd like to leave some other forms of support, maybe consider leaving a like, possibly going and subscribing, or even going and hyping. Hyping is a newer feature that you can do if you're watching a video on mobile, and it just helps go and promote my video, especially to other people that haven't been to this tiny corner of the internet before. But as always, I always wrap up my videos with this little reminder to always remember that you're worthy and capable of amazing things. Bye, friends.